What we just heard, though, always kind of reminds me about the connection there is between music and memory, right? Like sometimes you just hear a song and it throws you back to a season in your life or maybe an experience that you had. And that's the thing about building playlists. I don't know if you're a playlist type person, where you hear the same song maybe over and over and over. And I would not categorize myself as a playlist person. I have different genres of music that I enjoy, but I don't deliberately put them together. But there are certain types of music that I listen to when I go for a walk, that's different than when I'm mowing the grass, that might be different than when I'm just driving around day in and day out. And the thing that I have learned about creating playlists of your favorite songs is that sometimes you can hear that favorite song so much, like you play it all the time, it's on the car, every time you get in the car, it's the song that's playing. Maybe you set it to your ringtone, right, to wake you up in the morning. And after a while, you just get tired of that song. Has anybody ever like that, where you're just like, if I hear that song one more time, that's just it? And we think to ourselves, man, it's boring. Golly, I've heard it all before. And that song that you once treasured then and loved becomes overplayed and you get tired of it. The joy that it used to bring you, maybe it just doesn't bring that same level of joy anymore. And the reason that I bring this up is today we are starting our summer reading series. If you're a regular part of our church, we do this every summer. As folks are in and out of town and doing different things throughout the summer, we like to stay focused and yet do things in the context of a series where you're not missing something if you go on vacation and you don't have a chance to watch online. And so this year, we're going to be digging into the Psalms, which is something that we have never done as a church. And the song that we're going to look at today may fall into the category of being overplayed for some of us. And some of us are going to think, I have heard that a million times before. Like if you've ever been to a funeral, you've heard somebody read or quote from Psalm 23. Rappers like Kanye and Coolio, remember Coolio? If you remember Coolio, that tells me how old you are, rapped about that psalm. President Bush quoted the 23rd Psalm after the tragic events of September the 11th. If you've watched movies, there have been various scenes in movies where people have used or recognized the words of Psalm 23. It's become so familiar that it might have lost its power or its relevance in our lives. And yet there's so much life-altering and transforming and comforting truth in this psalm. Because in Psalm 23, what we see so clearly is the character and the activity of God on behalf of those who fully place their trust in him. And so I want to read it for us. Here it is, Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. It's powerful, man. If you let your mind, and beyond your mind, your heart, drift into what's actually being said. If you're not familiar with Psalm 23, it was written by David. David was the second king of Israel who, when the prophet Samuel came to his family's house to appoint him as the next king of Israel, David was actually out in the fields tending his flock. He was a shepherd. And while he was overlooked by his own father, he was not overlooked by God. And so this is like a transcendent moment in his life when Samuel shows up to tell him, yo, you're going to be the next king. God's picked you. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly when in the life of King David this psalm was written. But the general consensus among most scholars, they believe that it was right around the time where David's son Absalom was trying to overthrow David and take his throne from him. So imagine that. If that's the case, David is literally running for his life from his own son, trying not to lose the throne that God had given him. It's fair to say that things were not really going great for David. And yet, at some point, he sat down and he penned this psalm. And he came to the powerful conclusion, like if you're a big idea person, this is the big idea of the day. That God is a good shepherd and a gracious host who is fully committed and attentive to those who put their trust in him. So what we see is David saying, it's God, man. God's the one that guides. God's the one that brings provision into your life. God's the one that protects in the most challenging of circumstances. He goes before you into all of your life and all of the sin and everything that the enemy can throw at you. And he offers you peace and joy and security all the days of your life because of the sacrifice, not of your life, but of his own life. And so David begins this psalm, verse 1, by saying, the Lord is my shepherd. This is a statement about the character of God. If you want to know what God is like, David's saying, consider the life and the character of a good shepherd. What does a good shepherd do? It's important for us to know, right? Because we don't have a lot of sheep herds in the Knoxville area. Like I've never met someone that is an actual shepherd. Well, a good shepherd purchases the sheep, right? A good shepherd puts his mark of ownership on those sheep. A good shepherd is the one who protects and provides, who goes before the sheep to care for them. It's the shepherd that takes care of the sheep when they're hurt or when they're injured. And when necessary, the shepherd then is willing to lay down his life for the sake of the herd. And so it's David that's reflecting on this, even as he's running for his own life. Can't get much worse than your own son, your flesh and blood, trying to overthrow you to take power from you. And yet David sits down, and as he thinks about his relationship with God, he's filled with joy and filled with gratitude that God is a good shepherd. Jesus himself picks up on this in John chapter 10. Jesus says, the thief comes only to steal and to kill and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. And so one of the questions that we all have to wrestle with from time to time is God your shepherd? Like really? Have you fully submitted your life to God? Not, he's a shepherd that I know something about, not a shepherd that I'm around every once in a while, not someone that I call on when I feel like I can't do it myself, but when you look at the totality of your life, where you are right now, is God your shepherd? Have you fully surrendered to him? Life will not be what it could be until you do. I have found that out the hard way. If that is true, then the next statement that David makes is also true of your life. He says, the Lord is my shepherd, therefore I shall not want. I shall not want. This is a statement about contentment. It's the one thing that every human being is searching for, whether we realize it or not. Really, this is summarizing the whole rest of the psalm in one phrase. And what David is saying is, I've got nothing to worry about because of who's in charge of my life. It's not that every wish that I ever have is going to get granted. It doesn't mean that everything will go exactly how I planned it to. It doesn't mean that every dream that enters into my mind that I think, wow, that's something I want to pursue in my life is always going to get fulfilled. Nor does it mean that every prayer that you and I ever pray will get answered. Rather, what David is saying is, God has given me, in spite of that, everything that I need to actually live a God-honoring life. There's a difference between wish fulfillment and taking the one and only life that you and I have been given and living it in such a way that it honors God. Verse 2 and 3 explain how we get that contentment. I was reading a book this week called A Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23. It's written by a guy named W. Philip Keller. He was the son of some missionaries. And at one point in his life, he actually became a shepherd. And so he's reflecting on that, and he focuses on the 4 things that make the good shepherd good that I would offer to you today. The first of all is this, Psalm 23, verse 2. He makes me lie down in green pastures. I don't know what comes to your mind when you think about a green pasture. But I think about the pasture that my grandmother kept when I was growing up, my dad's mom. She always had, she rented it out to people, so they had cows and all kinds of stuff. And the grass was always just beautiful. And so when I think of green pastures, I think of this lush, like really deep green, where there's enough food for all the animals to have everything that they need. And Keller writes about this in his book, and what he says about those green pastures is this: green pastures did not happen by chance. Green pastures were the product of tremendous labor, time, and skill in land use. It's something we don't ever think about, right? Like grass just grows. It rains, it's beautiful, it's lush. Go out and enjoy it, sheep. It's gonna be awesome. But he goes on to explain that the grass is only green because of the good shepherd. He goes ahead of the sheep and plows the land. He pulls up all the weeds. He plants the grass himself so that the sheep have the opportunity to flourish and to enjoy good grass. It did not happen on its own. He had to go prepare the way. David is saying the same thing is true for us. That anything good that you and I experience in this life, it is because we have a good shepherd. And I don't know about you, but when I reflect on my life, I can honestly say everything good in my life is because of Jesus. All of it. And there was a time in my life where I was arrogant enough to think, well, I did this all on my own. Look, it's ridiculous. Even the people that helped me get a step up in life, God brought them into my life. It's not like I conjured them up. I'm not the sharpest crayon in the book. I'm a deep introvert. Speaking in front of people freaks me out. I've been doing it 28 years and I still want to vomit every time I walk on the stage. And I think to myself, yet I got this calling and God somehow, some way is using my life to touch somebody else's life. That's all because of Jesus. Gonna be married 32 years to the same girl. Beth and I fell in love in college, and for whatever reason, she has stood by my side for 32 straight years. That is God's grace. We got these 3 great kids, man. 2 of the 3 are married. We got these great daughter-in-laws. One's had a baby, another's gonna have a baby this week, man. We're gonna have 2 grandkids. When I look back at my life, I'm like, what? I mean, everything good in my life is because of Jesus. And I think if you'll take time to think about that yourself, the answer is always gonna come back the same. Yeah, you may have intellect, and yeah, you may have resources, and yeah, there may have been people that helped you along the way, gave you a hand up, but who brought that into your life? It was God. David's saying that's how you find contentment. You realize who's actually in control of your life. The second activity of the Good Shepherd is much like the first. He leads me beside still waters. In our context, okay, cool. It's a big deal. Sheep cannot drink out of flowing water. You ought to Google it. It's crazy. They got to have calm water. And so it's the shepherd that goes ahead of them, just like in the green pasture, blocks up the stream to calm things down so they can actually get something to drink. And again, it's David making a declaration that it is God that goes before us. God goes before his sheep to make sure they have everything they need to enjoy the life and goodness that comes with being a part of his flock. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. The third activity of the Good Shepherd is he restores my soul. He restores my soul. This could be spiritual renewal. This could mean repentance from sin. It may be a physical restoration of health. See, a shepherd, when an animal's being attacked or insects start to infect that animal, or maybe it's just a situation where the wool gets too thick to move, it's the shepherd that goes in and make sure that that sheep, that their soul is renewed and restored to them. He restores my soul. And then the fourth thing the Good Shepherd does is he leads me in paths of righteousness. You may know this about sheep, but they are not that smart, to put it mildly. They need a lot of guidance and a lot of attention. They don't just stumble into greatness on their own. Here's a perfect example. Say you got a sheep, and they're out in the green pastures doing their thing, whatever sheep do with other sheep, and they're having fun, and life is great, and they're grazing, and there's nice water, but there's a ditch, and so that sheep wanders into the ditch and gets stuck. And as it tries to free itself, it gets hurt, but it wants to be free from the situation. And so as you might expect, the shepherd has to go into the ditch, free the sheep, and get it out of that difficult situation. And finally, the sheep is free. And the sheep is back to loving life and is like, yo, let's go, man. I love being a sheep. And then the second that sheep finds freedom and goes back to its normal activity, it runs right back into the very same ditch. And the shepherd's got to do the same thing again. What David is saying is you and I are a lot like sheep. In fact, the prophet Isaiah says this: all we, like sheep have gone astray. We have all turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. In other words, if you and I were left to our own devices, we would choose our own path, would we not? And those paths often endanger us, and it endangers the lives of the people that we say we love. And so God sets a standard. God gives us a roadmap, like there's a path in life that God sets before us that will lead us to become both the people we were created to be and give us the exact same thing that we're looking for. Every single human being, no matter where we are in our life circumstance, all of us want to know that there's meaning in life, that we're not just taking up space, that we're not just ticking days off of a calendar, that we don't have to live with this sort of uncertainty of I don't even know why I've been placed on this planet. We all want a deep sense of purpose. We want fulfillment, to know that there's something deeper in life. We need and desire a clean soul, whether we realize it or not. So much of what we chase after in this world is because we know that something on the inside is broken and messed up, and we cannot fix it on our own. See, we like sheep have gone astray, but the good news Isaiah was trying to say is, but God laid our sin on Jesus' shoulders. You and I can really be free. The one thing that we can't fix on our own, God has made a way for that to be fixed. See, that's grace, y'all. And the good news is God's grace never runs out. That's why we say it all the time, man. You can't beg for it. You can't borrow it. You can't steal grace from somebody else. Doesn't matter what your mama's faith was. Doesn't matter what your parents, how they raised you or didn't raise you. Doesn't matter how many bad things happened to you. Doesn't matter how many things in your life you're getting right. You just can succeed all you want to succeed, but you got to receive God's grace as a gift. It is freely offered. It's the one thing in life that you cannot mandate for yourself. It's God just saying, I love you, and I'm willing to lay down my life for you. I'm leading you into green pastures. I'm leading you beside still waters. I'm restoring your soul. I'm doing the things that you cannot do for yourself. I am the good shepherd. I want to hit verse 4 and then we're going to wrap it up. David says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The valley of the shadow of death. We make that literal when we read that psalm. And we contextualize that to our own culture. And when we think about the valley of the shadow of death, most of us think about when we're at the funeral of a loved one. If you're a person of a certain age, maybe you're thinking about your own funeral that's coming one day. But when David's writing this, he's talking about that valley. So you got a green pasture and you got still waters, but if you got enough sheep, eventually that pasture is going to wear out, so you got to go find a new pasture, a new place. And that in between was often literally a valley, because most of the places the sheep grazed were on top of mountains. And so literally they would have to walk down into the valley, which is where the danger was. That's where the wild animals are. That's where the things that can injure you are. That's That's where there's no sun. The mountains are so tall that you get down in the shadow and literally the mountains block out the light. And here's the reality. Many of us right now maybe feel like, man, I get that. Because I feel like I'm in between mountains too. I feel like maybe I'm walking through the valley of the shadow of death. Maybe for you it's cancer. I think about all the people that I know personally who over the last year or so have gotten a diagnosis. Man, it's brutal. And there are a few things on this planet, I think, that make you feel more isolated and alone than hearing that word from a doctor. I think about people that struggle from things like extreme migraines, right? Like we might blow that off, but if you're a migraine person, man, you know how debilitating that is. I think about all the people maybe that have lost a loved one recently, or the young couples that have suffered a miscarriage. You just wanted to start your family. It's like it's just not gonna happen. It feels like the valley of the shadow of death. I think about the parents who maybe are going through developmental hurdles with a child. I think about all of us that are lonely right now, or people that have faced things like multiple back injuries, right? We blow off back pain, man, but if you got back pain, you can't blow that off. It's like legit. See, David is giving a solution for when we find ourselves in the midst of the valley. He's saying the reason that you and I don't have to be afraid, it's not because we're good enough, and it's not because we're strong enough, and it's not because we're smart enough, and it's not because we've got enough resources to get ourselves through. David's saying the reason I can endure and walk through the valley of the shadow of death is because the good shepherd is with me every step of the way. And so David comes to the conclusion that I hope you and I will come to today. He says in verse 6, because of the good shepherd, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long. See, when you don't treat this as something you've heard a million times before, when you don't just skate over it because you heard it at your grandmother's funeral and you just can't hear it one more time. When you think to yourself, I grew up in the church, every vacation Bible school I went to, somebody got their Psalm 23 on. Or every time I go to the bathroom, right? I'm standing there and I'm looking up at my aunt's wall and she's got crocheted Psalm 23, right? Sometimes you end up doing that kind of thing. But when you let it sink in and you think about what David's actually saying, it is the preeminent declaration. It's the reason we exist as a church. It's the only thing that makes being a person of faith worth doing. It's the realization that God is a great, big, huge God who's full of grace and mercy, who wants the best for his children, his sheep. Who's guiding, who's prodding, who's leading, who's growing, who's caring for, who's providing provision. And yeah, I know there are moments in life where it feels like God doesn't care or God is somewhere else on the other side of the universe. And I know there are moments when we search and we hurt and we just don't understand. It's okay. It's okay. David is trying to communicate because God is so good. In the end, it's going to be all right. Friends, I believe that. I honestly really do believe that. In the end, it's going to be all right. I don't know how your diagnosis is going to turn out, but I know it's going to be okay. I don't know what's going to happen with your son or daughter, but in the end, it's going to be all right. I don't know about the future of your job. I don't know about what's going on in your marriage. I don't know about what tomorrow's going to bring, but I've got enough faith to know that if God's going to meet us out there, then in the end, it's going to be all right. In the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, amen.